So for those of you who've been following my channel for a while now, you know that I often say that I don't have a traditional finance background. I didn't go to school specifically for finance, econ, and I didn't have a 9 to 5 finance job, though I've done some freelance stuff in the past. That has all now changed. I have my first real finance job. I'm an analyst at a company in the mid-Atlantic region of the United States on the East Coast. And it's a hybrid role, which I'm lucky about, or lucky to have found, because that's pretty rare in this field. But I am excited to go into the office when I can, because I do want to learn from as much or as many people as possible. But for the most part, I'll be working from home, which is nice, a nice perk. But I want to make this video because I feel like a large portion of people in the CFA program may have a job already in finance, but there's also probably a large amount who are using the CFA to break into finance, as I did. Again, I also don't even have a proper degree in finance. So I want to give you my thoughts and takes, because I feel like someone with my background who was able to break into this very competitive field, I think I have a lot of information that I can give to you guys to help you out. So I took some notes, and I have this video split up into 2 sections. The first is what I like to call the setup. What needs to be in place? What do you have kind of working for you before going down the tactical path, which I think is the most interesting, because I'm going to use my own experience. Well, I'm going to use my own experience for both ends, but the second section is very much more data involved. So there are 4 things that I think are important as far as your setup. Now, the first thing, a couple things are going to be somewhat out of your control if you're an adult. One is maybe not as immutable, but the first one is location. Location. You need to make sure that you are in a physical location, because again, most of these jobs are in person. You need to be in a location that has a wide swath and variety and number of jobs in finance, because you need to be able to wake up every day and see that there are new jobs in LinkedIn, new jobs in Indeed that you can apply to. Now, there are some that are remote, but honestly, I don't know. I just find that some of those remote jobs, they tend to be an FP&A, and that if that is something that you want to go down, then that's fine. I wasn't too into FP&A, but I found that many of those FP&A roles, were online. But I would say location is going to be important, because you need to have a wide volume of jobs that you can apply for. That's going to come in handy once we get into the tactics. The second thing is, and this is something you can't really control, and I am fully aware of this, and this played a huge role actually into my job, but who you know matters. Now, it is not fair. I am fully aware of this. I actually did not expect to have someone that I knew impact me so positively with my experience. But if I'm going to be honest about this whole thing, I can't deny the fact that who I actually knew, that person did help me get this role. So if you are someone who has a really wide network, that'll work well for you. If you are just now starting this process, network your butt off, but make it very organic, because you'll find that even if you do network, you may not even connect with those people in the long term. So make sure it's an organic connection. Your education. Now, obviously, this is where the CFA comes in. I will also say, in addition to who I knew, the people that I actually interviewed with at the job that I have gotten, they were either participants in the CFA program or they were CFA charter holders. So these people knew about the program. They knew how difficult it was. And I just passed level 2, and I put that on my resume, and that I passed level 2. And I think them seeing that likely was like, well, hey, I mean, this guy, if he passed level two, then he must be, he must know something. So I will say that I do think the CFA did give me a little bit of a boost, but it only gave me a boost because the people that I interviewed with were aware of the CFA program. And also, I will say skill set and experience. So someone I did interview with did ask me about my skill set, and they did ask me some detailed things. I did tell them about, they asked me about my experience with Python and modeling. And I told them about the things that I've done with each of those skills. And again, I did take that Python course last year, but I also have prior experience with coding, and I, passed the FMVA course, and I got that certificate recently. So these are hard skills that I do think people will want to check you for in the interview process. So make sure you have your skill sets down as well. So that's the setup. Let's go into the tactics. The main phrase that needs to go through your head when it comes to your approach is apply, collect data, pivot. Those three things basically over and over again: apply, collect data, pivot, because essentially this whole thing is a numbers game. Now, before I got into finance, I was in the field of marketing. Marketing is all about the numbers game. It's about lead generation. It's about how many people can I get this ad in front of? A small percentage of them, a very small percentage of them will click, and a smaller percentage of those people will buy. When I had that in my head, that was the tactic that I chose to use, and I think it worked. So I applied to over 174 jobs between June and August of 2023. And out of the 174 jobs, I was ghosted. I didn't hear anything back. I was ghosted by 69.54% of them. Didn't hear a thing back from 69.54% of 174 jobs. I was rejected. So these are people I did hear back from. I was rejected by 29.31%. I was interviewed by 1.72%, and I was given a job offer by 0.57%. So this basically followed my strategy to a T, my marketing strategy, which was numbers game, spray and pray kind of thing. Some people are not going to like it. They'll scroll by. These are the ghosters. Some people will say, hey, we don't really like this. These are the people who may leave a comment on your Facebook ad and say, hey, I don't like this. Some people will click on the button to see what your online store looks like. And that's them maybe interviewing you. And then some people will give you a job offer, and that's the people who decide to buy. And you just have to understand that a small percentage of these people will be the final buyers, will be the final people who will give you a job offer. So I didn't do this all with one resume. And I think this is important because this is where the pivot comes in. I didn't just use one resume and apply to 174 jobs. After about 30 or so jobs, I pivoted because I realized that I personally didn't like my resume, and I think it was kind of all over the place. I focused it and made it much more of a finance-centric resume. And I will, and I'll say, like, it was much more detailed, much more focused on my skills as opposed to my education, experience, things that weren't relevant to the job. I made sure that I was relevant to the job. And one of the things I did, because I was aware of the ATS system, and for those of you who don't know, that's the application tracking software. And basically, one thing that many applicants are fearful of is that when you submit your application, your resume, a human doesn't even get to look at it. Basically, it gets fed through a system, and the system decides whether your resume will get passed along to a human being. This didn't happen to me at all. I had a 0% hit rate in the first 30 applications that I did. So I realized I needed to change things up. I looked at a bunch of finance job applications that I wanted to apply for. I put them all into Google Sheets, and then I did a word cloud generation to pick out the most prominent words, and I made sure that I used those words in my resume. I didn't do that thing where people kind of copy and paste the whole resume, shrink it, and put it at the bottom of your resume and code it white. I didn't do that. I just took the keywords that I found were very, superfluous amongst all these different job applications, and I made sure I used those words in my resume. So that was the main adjustment that I did. And of course, there were some structure things as well. After that, I noticed that I got 2% of my second resume got 2% of interviews from out of all the jobs that I applied for using that second resume. So I did notice a change. I also had fewer rejections. My first resume got 32% rejections. My second resume only got 29% of rejections out of all the jobs that I applied to. Then I made a little bit of an adjustment after I passed level 2. I put that into my resume as well, and that was my third resume update. And then I noticed that I got 2% of my applications; those got interviews, and then only 27% of those applications got rejections. So again, pretty good upward trajectory there. So I applied, I collected data, and then I pivoted to crafting a better resume. So let's get into my job and my whole experience with that. So I applied to a job, and funny enough, when I applied to the job, I knew that the person that I knew worked at that job. The other funny thing is that this person was a person I talked to regarding the CFA program. Before I got into the CFA program, I tried to contact as many people as I could who were CFA charter holders to tell me about their experience with the CFA program. And this guy worked at this job, but my main focus in calling him was about the CFA program. This was about 2 years ago. So I wasn't expecting I wasn't even going to name drop this guy. I wasn't even going to ask him to be a reference for me, because I just thought that, I don't know, I just don't like doing that, as much. I know people say, hey, use your network, but for me, I don't know, I don't know, maybe it's a pride thing, I don't know. But the person asked me, the first person I interviewed asked me, hey, how did you hear about our job? And then I said, well, hey, I spoke to this guy about the CFA program. He told me that he worked at your job. He told me that he really liked this place. And to me, that was a ringing endorsement. And then that drove me to find out more about the company. And then this person was like, oh, who is it? And then I told them the name. And then they're like, oh, I know that person. And then they're like, yeah, even though this company is, it's a large company, there aren't that many employees. So you kind of tend to know a lot of people that work here. So I was like, all right, that's a bonus. Then the next interview comes, and the first thing the person tells me is, hey, you know this person? How do you know this person? And then the next interview comes, and they're like, hey, you know this person? And I just realized that initial setup was probably enough to at least help me to win, or it probably helped me win them over a little bit. Also, I will say, after that second interview, that person, and I'm not really sure, but I think that person texted the person I knew. I didn't tell this person, the person that I knew, that I was interviewing for this job at his former company. He texted me and he was like, hey, I heard from, this person that you're interviewed with. and it looks like a great opportunity. And then he and I started chatting again, and yeah, I mean, it was just it made me realize that you have to really put yourself out there, get to know people. But funny enough, this person was someone that I knew from middle school and high school. And then he and I kind of would bump into each other every now and then through one of our mutual friends from, again, middle school and high school. They went to the same college together. So every now and then we kind of bump into each other. And then after 10 years, I called him to ask about the CFA program. And then 2 years later, I'm working at his former job. So you just never know how things play out. But I would say that luck definitely helps, I'm sure, play a role with me knowing somebody who formerly worked there. But in that second interview, in that third interview, those two people didn't just stop at who I knew. They're like, well, you're also pursuing the CFA program and da 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 da. And they're like, oh, you also know coding and so I will say networking is important, but also make sure that you have your skill sets down. Also, do not discount the CFA program, especially when you're interviewing with people who know about the program or who are CFA charter holders themselves. They will likely see that you are a very hardworking person because of that. And I think that did help play a role. Now, again, I'm in the Mid-Atlantic on the East Coast. This is Finance Central. So I was able to apply to a lot of jobs, again, using this tactic of applying to 174 jobs within 2 months. It may be a little bit more difficult given where you are. Wherever country you are, try to, if you can, move to the center of finance or business and try to apply to as many places as you can in those areas. Try to connect with people that you may have gone to school with, who may be working in those jobs in those cities, and try to find some common ground and ask them about what they're up to, and then maybe a couple of years down the line, reach out to them again and say like, hey man, I'm interested in this job. What do you think? Because again, I think networking, it's a relationship building thing. You don't want to just use somebody. I'm not a big fan of that anyway, so make sure that you really establish a good rapport with people. Make sure you move to a location with a lot of opportunities, and make sure that you're still pursuing the CFA program, because it did help me, and also make sure you're improving your skill sets as well, and not just relying on the theory that you're learning in the CFA program. Really get your hands dirty. So yeah, that is my process. That was my process. That was my experience with getting a job. Let me know what you think. Have you gotten your first finance job? What was your experience like getting your first finance job? And let people know in the comment section below so that they can get some inspiration. And again, this is coming from someone who doesn't have a formal education in finance and a formal 9-to-5 background in finance. So try to put as many of the odds in your favor, because you are fighting an uphill battle if you are in my position. So again, let me know what you think about all this. And also, if you haven't checked out any of my other videos on this channel, check out this video here about the CFA program.